All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing an off-season guide on the Carolina Panthers. They're coming off a 5-12 season. It's actually a lot better than it seems at face value here. They need a Commanders type of off-season here where, like, specifically on the defensive side of things, rush defense, secondary, there's a lot of things that need to be addressed with the defense. They also need to just straight up find their culture. But first year head coach Dave Canales benched Bryce Young in his sophomore campaign in week 3. But because Andy Dalton sprained his thumb in a car accident, Bryce Young got a second opportunity. And he trended in the right direction in the final 10 games of his sophomore campaign. But in his final 3 games, he threw for 7 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. And I don't really like the discourse with Bryce Young one bit. Most people, when you talk about the Carolina Panthers at this point in time, it's like, oh, how do you fix the Carolina Panthers? Well, you sell the team, right? Right, chat, right? Just sell the team. The Panthers are the laughing stock of the National Football League. And when you watch the Panthers, when most people watch the Panthers, mainly because of fantasy football, people just watch Red Zone, right? Unless you're watching your team play at 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, Sunday night, Monday night, Thursday night, whatever. If you're watching the Carolina Panthers, it's usually a Bryce Young low light or a Carolina Panthers low light because it's Red Zone. These are just like brief highlights. If you're a Panthers fan, or if you watch NFL film, or if you just watched some Bryce Young games, you know what I'm talking about. Bryce Young is the future of the Carolina Panthers, and I will stand on that to the end of his NFL career. But folks, before we get into this video, hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content. We're going to be discussing the Carolina Panthers, like we said at the beginning of the video, at large. I haven't made a Panthers video in a while. I remember the first time I made a Panthers video was kind of around when they drafted Bryce Young. I've always been very big on this guy, and I think even just, we could talk about the fundamentals. We could talk about technique. We could talk about his improved footwork. We could get into the meat and potatoes of Bryce Young and those kind of steps that he took in his sophomore campaign. But to me, just to put it like blunt and plainly, the body language, the energy, this is a different Bryce Young. His numbers over the past, or let me phrase it this way, all right? Bryce Young's numbers in his first ever 18 NFL starts, including week 1 and 2 this year, prior to his week 3 benching, all right? 59.3% completion percentage. He only threw for 3,122 yards, 11 touchdowns, 13 interceptions, along with a pass rating of 70.9. Not good, including a 2-6 Panthers record. Now, from week 8, when Bryce Young took back the starting role through the end of the season, PFF scored Bryce with a 83.7 passing grade, which this will blow you away. The 6th best in the league over that span. I'm going to reiterate that one more time for my Bryce Young haters out there and even my Panthers haters out there. From week 8, when Bryce Young took back over through the end of the season, PFF scored him with an 83.7 passing grade, 6th best in the NFL. He was ahead of Baker Mayfield. He was ahead of Sam Darnold, both playoff teams, very good quarterbacks. And he capped off his sophomore campaign with a 44-38 overtime victory against the Atlanta Falcons. In that game, he accounted for 5 touchdowns, finished with a career best 123.5 passer rating, and had the highest Panthers scoring output in, drumroll please, 7 years. He joined a couple of quarterbacks as the only 3 quarterbacks as the only players in NFL history to rack up 3 touchdown passes and 2 rushing touchdowns in a game before their 24th birthday. So if you're wondering what the future holds, what's the future of the Carolina Panthers? It starts and ends, in my opinion, with Bryce Young. And I've already even seen a couple of articles out there saying, like, well, I think he showed us enough in the second half of the season to be the starter in year 3. What on earth are you watching? I don't know what these people are watching. Bryce Young, 100,000 billion% will be the week 1 starter for the Carolina Panthers in the 2025-2026 NFL season. So let's look into this offseason, all right? According to Spotrac, you guys have about $24.1 million in cap space. When we look ahead to the April NFL 2025 draft, the Panthers have 9 total selections as it stands, including 8 in the first 5 rounds, also highlighted by the 8th overall pick in the draft. So what are some of their bigger needs? All right. Well, if you ask anybody else, it's defensive line depth, it's edge depth, all right? If you ask, probably like a hardcore Panthers fan, they're going to say the center position. And by the way, both of those are 2 huge needs. They're both huge needs, and they will be addressed whether it's draft or free agency this offseason for Carolina, or they better be, right? To me, number 1 is the wide receiver position. But before we get into the wide receiver position, I think they're going to kind of revamp this roster. I have a feeling they're going to go out there and trade some guys. Shaq Thompson's Carolina Panther career might be over. Another season. He got injured a couple of games into the season. This is now back-to-back years now. Also keep in mind, getting Derek Brown back is going to be huge. But I have a inclination that the Panthers are going to look into trading some of these veterans. Jadeveon Clowney is probably the best trade chip that this roster has because he's a proven player. He carries a $8.5 million base salary, but if they trade him, that clears $7.8 million in cap space. So I think he might just be a cap casualty. But to me, the biggest thing is the wide receiver position. I would have loved to see way more Jonathan Brooks this past year at running back, but his injury. I would have loved to see a little bit more involvement from JT Sanders in the offensive game plan, but I'm still very bullish and very big on both those 2 guys. Also, Xavier, your 2nd round draft pick from last season, I am very excited. Actually, I think it was the last pick in the 1st round, 32nd overall, right? So never mind. I'm excited about Xavier, Jonathan, and JT. But there's 2 trade targets that really kind of are interesting because last year around this time, the Carolina Panthers traded for Deontay Johnson from the Pittsburgh Steelers in return for Dante Jackson, the cornerback. That didn't pan out. Deontay Johnson didn't pan out, and on any of the other teams he got waived or picked up from, right? Garrett Wilson and George Pickens are interesting. I saw an article on Bleacher Report. I don't really love what you're giving up for here, but when you just zoom out at the wide receiver position in general, the leading receiver was Adam Thielen, 48 catches for 615 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's 34 years old. So I would like to see what this wide receiver room can do, and I'd like to see what Bryce Young can do with not your wide receiver number 1 being 34-year-old Adam Thielen. Now, the Panthers, like we said, don't have a whole bunch of cap space, so if they're going to make a move at wide receiver and it's not the 8th overall pick or not a 2nd rounder, you have to assume they're going to trade for a guy like George Pickens or like Garrett Wilson and then extend him for the next couple of years. This was a mock that I saw for Pickens. I know he's had some kind of emotional question marks on the Steelers sideline and even just on the field. So I'm not saying George Pickens is the receiver for you, but just to give you a gauge of what other people are saying, a 2025 2nd round pick, 57th overall, and a Sean Robinson for George Pickens and a 2025 7th. Let me know if you would do that trade if you were the Carolina Panthers. But it all starts and ends as well, obviously the quarterback, but defenses still help win you championships. And the Carolina Panthers were the 32nd ranked defense this past year. They were also the 32nd ranked rushing defense. The Panthers not only gave up over 31 points per game this past season, they also gave up 180 rushing yards per game. And no, we're not in a Madden simulation. That's a real stat. The Panthers became the 4th team in NFL history and the first since 1980. Yep, 1980. It's 2025. To give up 3,000 plus rushing yards in a season. They allowed the most points as well in a season in league history at 534. So you're going to see a very big defensive turnaround. Now, let me know if you guys want a more defensive-centric Panthers video. I will probably do it regardless. But as always, hit that like button, hit that sub button for daily NFL content. And guys, give me a good gauge for the Carolina Panthers as we head into the offseason. Thank you for watching. Peace.